Yeah, so welcome to the Jay White Show. And this is where we're going to talk about real estate in Charlotte and just all that kind of stuff. We'll just go from there. So my name is Jay White. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been a real estate agent for almost 20 years. I was born in Charlotte, which is a little bit unusual just in and of itself. And I've got an awesome guest with me here today, one of my partners, Christina Brown.
Hey, I'm Christina Brown. I have been with the Jay White Group for 9 years now. I'm a wife and a mom of two grown kids now, and I love being in real estate and love talking about it and teaching about it, and glad to be here.
Cool. So what we're going to do today is we've had some questions that have been sent to us, and we're just going to kind of answer. We don't know what the questions are until Kiara reads them. So the fun part is, I think for us, is you're going to get real answers without any research and rehearsing and that kind of thing, which I think is more authentic.
No pressure. Here we go.
No pressure. Okay, so if you were thinking about getting into real estate investing, like what are the basics? What would you think about first? So, think back to before you bought your first investment property. Like, what did you not know that you know now, where you go, that was important?
So I think the biggest hurdle for people who are thinking about going into investing is whenever they think about carrying costs for that first rental, because you see what you're about to spend on the property. And so for me, I remember looking at the purchase price for that first property when we don't have that kind of money, and not understanding that we didn't need that kind of money. We only needed that 25% down to get started. So I think that's something that a lot of people need to know, is that the startup cost for going into investing and rentals is not as high as you think it's going to be.
Right.
I think you have to be cognizant of costs that could come up that are unexpected. Like, just because your property is cash flowing does not mean it's going in your pocket. That you're going to have a reserve account, of course, $5 or $10,000 in case the air conditioner dies or the roof gets a hole. And then I think the other part of it is you can't fake it, right? You need to ask people who have traveled it before to say, what does this road in investing look like, and what have you learned that I need to know? And I think if you're open to questions and taking guidance from people who have done it before, it's really not as scary as you think it is. It's like everything else. The first one is the hardest.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them, you're like, let's do it again and repeat.
So it's funny, right? Like when I think about real estate investing now, I think the reasons to do it is cash flow, appreciation, depreciation
For sure.
on taxes, and then leverage. I think those are the four things. And I think each one of them in and of itself is a very basic concept. But when you put them all together, it's a really incredible investment tool. If I was going to go buy $200,000 of Amazon stock, I have to have $200,000.
Right.
If I was going to go buy a $200,000 house, and I get that those are few and far between these days, but when I started, that's kind of what it was. I just need 25% of 200,000. So I need 50,000 to buy a $200,000 50,000 to buy a $200,000 asset. And then other people pay for that asset for you. And the benefit of all the extra money is the cash flow, right? And then the next piece of it is depreciation. So like I'm depreciating that property on a schedule, and there's even tricks to do it faster.
Right.
And, so I'm essentially sheltering some of my income from income taxes. And then honestly, the last one is, again, the leverage piece of I can buy, multiple properties with the same amount of money that I would have to buy if I was buying stock or bonds or whatever.
Don't you think, though, that whenever you bought your first investment properties, after you made the purchase, you thought you kind of had it figured out? But with every purchase that we've made in investments,
You learn a little extra.
I'm learning a little extra, and I'm like, oh, that's a new layer. That's a new layer. Like, what is it? Whenever you have a cost aggregation study on an investment property.
So like when I see people of high net worth talking about their stock portfolio, I'm like, cool. But did you know that there's a way to like, if you're a high earner and your annual income is high, there's some things in real estate that if you're not taking advantage of, like you're paying more taxes than you need to pay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the market.
Okay.
Right? There's a lot of people that are asking, like, is the market going to crash? Are prices going to go down? You know, and we could talk macro, but let's talk specifically like the Charlotte market. We both believe that there's not any side of a crash of any sort. And in most cases, we don't see prices going down. Maybe there will be certain pockets where you'll see prices drop just a little bit. But let's talk about all of the factors of why we think Charlotte real estate is going to be very resilient to whatever's coming in the economy.
I mean, we're seeing here what people talk about during COVID. Everybody moved from New York to Nashville, right? Like Nashville became New York South. Charlotte is growing by leaps and bounds. Look at, we talk about the 485 circle being like the outside of the clock, but look on all the little towns on the outside of that perimeter. They're all seeing major industries coming in. We're seeing companies like Eli Lilly, Chewy,
when you
Amazon,
when you look at those towns, like let's name some of those towns, right? You've got, like, if you start the clock at 12 o'clock, you've got Statesville, and it used to be like no one went to Statesville.
No.
And now all of a sudden, Statesville's in the conversation as like an extended part of the Charlotte market.
Yeah, it's funny. Like even Statesville is a larger city on that northern corridor, but like I'm hearing a lot of people talk about like China Grove and Landis, like these little tiny.
Like I'm going around.
Towns.
So like if you say 1 or 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, now you've got Concord, Kannapolis, Mount Pleasant, Landis, Midland, Locust, Albemarle. Even is pushing out that far.
Growing exponentially.
I mean, and you're talking about cities that are from Center City that are on the close side 30 minutes and on the far side an hour away from Center City, that have all of a sudden become bedroom communities of Charlotte that never were. They were out in the sticks.
Well, I mean, Monroe used to feel like it was 100 miles from Charlotte. Right.
Because there's all those traffic lights. Well, now they've taken out all the traffic lights and made it literally like a little expressway. And now you can get from Monroe to downtown, if you're not in rush hour, from Monroe to downtown in 20 minutes.
And I remember thinking Lake Wiley was the other side of the world. Yeah. But truly, what you're seeing, and I think that speaks to the health of it, right?
Lancaster, Waxhaw, Fort Mill, Rock Hill,
Belmont,
York, Gastonia, Mount Holly, Denver and Dallas. Even remember, we went to a listing appointment in Iron Station,
and we felt like it was forever. I was like, "Are you sure we want to take this listing? It's so far away."
Right, and now it's Metro Charlotte.
Yeah,
we're getting out as far as Shelby, and even in some cases Hickory.
Yeah.
Right. It's just crazy how Charlotte has continued to really grow. And I think the reason it has is that we're still an affordable city. We have the ability to sprawl differently than a lot of cities have. There, some cities are bound geographically. You got an ocean on one side, or you got a major river or a state line or whatever. Charlotte has the ability to grow, and we've talked about this a long time. I think eventually we're going to grow into Greenville, South Carolina, which is 2 hours almost from downtown Charlotte. But that whole 85 corridor is growing. Speaking of the 85 corridor, we're going to grow all the way to Triad, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point. Like, we're going to grow into that. And then it's already started happening where you're seeing Charlotte go all the way down I-77 to Columbia almost. And then you're going to see it go the other way. And Statesville is a smaller town than the others we're talking about, but it's just continuing to boom. And it's because we're in this really interesting place that is halfway between DC and Atlanta, that is halfway between the mountains and the ocean.
It's ideal, right?
And we've got 4 seasons, and the temperature is the climate is moderate. And just across the line in South Carolina, you've got huge tax savings for senior citizens. And then you've got all these people that are being pulled here for work because so many of the top 500 companies in the U.S. have at least a strong presence here, if not a headquarters.
Well, I mean, you think about it, we've got the major airport, we've got major interstates that cross throughout the city. The grid for Charlotte, when we talk about people traveling, from one side of the city to the other side. Like you're in Charlotte, you're legitimately 45 minutes from anything.
Yeah.
So I live completely on the north side of town in Kannapolis, right? And I come down to the office in Ballantyne. It's a 45-minute drive, but I don't feel like it's the other side of the world where Charlotte's growth has kind
We
of
use Atlanta
that.
for an example,
Yeah.
right? Like if you were going from one side of Atlanta to the other, it's going to take you 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
When you go from one side of Charlotte to the other, you can do it in an hour pretty easily, unless it's rush hour or there's an accident or something crazy.
It's interesting too. People say I want to be close to the airport, and I'm like, well, that kind of define close.
Yeah, like
how close?
I
feel close to the airport.
I have a South Carolina address, and I can, if it's not a rush hour flight, I can leave my house in South Carolina and be at the airport, and I'm pre-check, so like I can be in the airport and through pre-check usually in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's wild.
It is.
For people to wrap their heads around.
And I think the growth potential for Charlotte is still really good. Like I don't feel like Charlotte has not arrived. I think Charlotte is growing into itself. It's really a cool city that has a ton to offer, not just professionally, but then also socially. We got the Whitewater Center.
You mentioned the lake. We have
lake's
tons of
great.
lake life.
Gosh, the theater scene, the food
The
scene
culture's
in Charlotte,
coming, the
culture's-
food's coming. Yeah.
And you've got each of these little communities that has their own vibe around it. Like what you get in Plaza Midwood is different from what you're going to get in Ballantyne.
Yeah.
And it's different than the flavor you're going to get.
That's a really good point too.
Really
We
is
have
cool.
such a different architecture in different areas of town. So like if you're coming from the plains and you go, hey, all we ever have known is like the Ramblers, like the ranch houses. Well, cool, we've got those.
We can find those.
And if you come from the Northeast and you're like, I'm used to Victorian, cool, we've got those. Or Craftsman. And you come from the West Coast or whatever, and you're like, hey, I really like modern, cool, we've got that too. Like it is a unique market, and then we have so many options available, and frankly across different price points.
Well, and I think that also speaks just like the design features, the architecture, the communities. It kind of speaks to what Charlotte says, which is like, come on, like we love y'all. Come on and be a part of our city.
I remember when I was new in the business, I couldn't tell you what year. Let's say 2006 or 7, maybe 2008. I got a call, and it was right when cell phones started showing you caller ID, and I recognized the area code as a 516 area code, which is like Long Island.
Right.
And so I answered the phone, and the lady was super nice, and she was asking me about a property that we had for sale that she saw on my website. And she said she wanted to know the taxes. And I said, well, listen, don't hold me to it, but I'm guessing it's right around $2,000. And again, this is a while back, but right around $2,000. And she's like, oh my goodness. And I said, what? And she said, that's more than I pay here. And I said, ma'am, you're calling me from a 516 area code. Is that Long Island? And she said, I live in Hempstead, New York. It's like right outside of Brooklyn. Yeah. And she said, and I pay $1,800 a month. And I said, well, ours are annual.
Oh,
and she was here the next year.
Yeah.
Like I think we underestimate, like we talk about the cost of living, and a lot of times as real estate agents, we just focus on the house price. But when you start talking about some of the taxes that people pay in some of these large municipalities and older municipalities, like, you look at the Rust Belt, Chicago, Cleveland, like some of the taxes these folks are paying, like Rochester, New York is crazy.
It's astronomical.
And certainly New York City, New Jersey, and when people see, oh, well, not only can I buy more house for the money, but my taxes are a third of what they are at home or whatever. That's a big deal. And I think we don't talk about it enough. I think the next thing, when you, the next story I have is, and again, I can't remember what year this was. This was probably a little bit later, maybe a few years after that. I had clients coming in they were bankers and coming in from San Francisco. And it was around the time Wells Fargo and Wachovia did the merger or whatever. Maybe it was even Bank of America. So they're coming from California, and their budget was like $500,000, and that was when $500,000 bought a ton of house here, right? And I remember picking out a couple of houses because the internet was still it was still newer, and so I picked out a couple of houses, and we went in one, and they're like, this is outrageous. that you can get this for here. Like this house where we come from is like $1.2 million. And so it was like at least double of what it was here. And I mean, the conversations every time we went in a house, they're like, you can get this for what? And look, listen, you can't buy a McMansion for $500,000 anymore. But the affordability in Charlotte is still better than it is in a lot of places in the country. Charlotte's super sensitive to school districts.
For sure.
Right. And I know other cities probably are, but Charlotte is very sensitive to school districts. So like when you see inventory in parts of town, but not in others, a lot of that is because of that. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. You see people live in a certain area until their kids graduate, and they're like, and we're out.
I mean, that's what we did.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we did. I think the other thing that we see a lot of times, and I could make an argument both ways, but I could make a stronger argument for owning a house in a marginal school district versus renting in a good school district when you don't have school age kids.
Right. If it's funny, we moved to Concord 20 years ago, and the school district that my daughter went through changed 4 times before she graduated. And that was before we were seeing the boom in Cabarrus County. So if someone is, let's use complete generalities right here. If they're in their late 20s, like married couple, late 20s, thinking about starting a family, and they go, we want to be in this school district, and we're buying here because of this school district.
And most of the time they're naming a high school.
They are naming a high school. I would look at them and say, I need you to understand that high school might not be the one that they're districted for. That high school actually might not even be in existence. Like, you need to be looking for an elementary school because it's going to change all the time.
Yeah, somebody told me if you wanted to change schools in Charlotte, just stay where you are.
Stay where you are. It's coming. It's going to change.
Yeah.
But as we see even those changes in school districts happening and rezoning plans for Charlotte Mecklenburg or for Cabarrus County or all the counties that surround, or even like counties like in Fort Mill for a while, there was a moratorium. Like, they weren't accepting any more students in certain schools. Like, you can move here, but you've got to take your kids somewhere else to school.
Yeah, we're not really sure where they're going to go yet.
Yeah. Those kind of environments, one, they make it fiercely competitive for people to get houses. Like, everybody wants to be where the best of the best is.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, when you talk to those people, you need to say, hey, you can't buy a house based solely on this.
Yeah.
Because this is likely to change.
Okay, so you're going to sell somewhere, I'm just going to use a really broad number, but you're probably going to sell 55 to 70 houses this year, which is insane. Sick. It's insane. If let's create some cadres for these buyer clients, right?
Okay.
If you're a first-time home buyer, what are you telling your first-time home buyers that they need to be doing to be able to be competitive in this market?
So I think the first thing is, when you think that you might want to buy a house in the future, talk to somebody early and set a plan. You need to be having these conversations as you are getting ready to come out of college or into the workforce to go, what do I want this to look like? How long do I want to rent? So I think that having a solid plan really early is important. If you are a first-time home buyer, understanding that the first house is not supposed to be the perfect house, right? I even look at a lot of clients and go, you know what? You can do anything for 2 years. Your first house is supposed to be sound and safe, and it might not be the prettiest house on the block, and that might even play to your advantage if it's not, but it should be a place that you can rest your head and love on a little bit and just see it, just avoid paying rent, right? Pay a mortgage. Basically, consider that first house a savings account.
Yeah, well, it is.
Yeah.
If I'm paying a mortgage, yes, I'm paying some interest, but the reality is I'm also paying myself.
Yeah. So let that first house just be getting in the game and be okay with that. And we're going to find you a really great place to get in the game. I don't want anybody to be in a house that they can't be proud of.
Yeah.
But what I find is most clients, when they get in a house and get started and they start making it a home, that's whenever the transition takes place. I've had very few clients who, I talk to 6 months later and they go, this was a mistake. In fact, I don't think I've ever had that scenario happen. So that's what I'm saying. First time
financial education.
Absolutely.
Right. Like, get rid of any debt we can get rid of. Like, make, because those payments are what crushes them.
Yeah.
Like the debt to income payments. or the payment to income payments, right? Like not necessarily on the house, but it's the student loans and the cars and the furniture to goes and the Havertys and the credit cards.
Credit cards are a killer.
Yeah.
And so that, again, is a part of that really good plan. The other thing that I think we see when people are moving from other places, whenever they're thinking about that value, remember the client that I had that said that she wanted a big yard?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'll show you a big yard. Well, by North Carolina standards, a big yard's like an acre, right? So I'm looking at houses that have acres of land and huge fenced yards and all the things. And she goes, Christina, we got to talk about this. Like, I don't want a farm. And I went, maybe we should quantify what a big yard looks like. And she said, well, I'm from Jamaica, New York. And she said, my yard, like, I have green space.
It's as big as this room.
And it's the size of this room. It's like a 8 by 10. And she was like, that's a big yard where I'm from. And she said, so you're showing me homes that have an acre of land. Like, I don't know what a person would do with that. I have another client from Arizona who was like, I've never owned a lawnmower before. Like, this is all very different. So our affordability is great. The interesting thing, I think, for people who are like North and South Carolina natives, because I grew up in North Carolina, you grew up primarily in North Carolina, like we are born and bred. It's hard for people who grew up here in the years of like furniture factory outlet world to go, Waxhaw is a hot spot. Like Waxhaw, because they remember when it was farm country.
It was just antiques and farm.
Right. It's hard for me to remember, my family worked for Springs Mill in Fort Mill. And it's hard for me to remember
nothing
the years
but peach
of nothing
orchards.
there. Yeah.
Nothing but peach orchards and
strawberries and textiles. To now say this area is a place where the average home is going to be $450,000 to $600,000. So I think there's also a little bit of a challenge for locals sometimes to wrap their mind around the cost of living. But I don't think that cost of living is isolated specifically to the Charlotte market. I grew up 2 hours away from here. And the price of homes there is competitive to what I'm seeing here.
On a percentage basis, so and you're talking about Rockingham, on a percentage basis, Rockingham has probably appreciated more than Charlotte.
Absolutely.
Right? Like it's probably tripled in value where Charlotte's doubled in value in the last 5 to 6 years.
But what I see a lot of, and it's really kind of cool, is that like my children are grown. My daughter just got married. They just bought a home, and I'm finding that a lot of kids are feeling like Charlotte is still a great place for them to live as adults, even if this is where they grew up. The city offers them a lot and a lot of affordability as well. So you're seeing a lot of people get just outside of the perimeter to where things are a little bit more affordable.
Yep.
On the inside of 485.
Well, it's where we talked about all those bedroom communities that are all of a sudden popping up with really cute, thriving downtowns, fun little small owned businesses, and it's just it's that Americana feel again, right?
I think all of the indicators, economic and otherwise, point to Charlotte's real estate market remaining healthy for a really long time.
I couldn't agree more. And okay, so if we've got all these buyers coming in and it's still really affordable and all of that, it's going to create competition with buyers.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So what are some of the challenges buyers are having right now?
So it's going to travel with price point. I think a lot of buyers are struggling sometimes to find inventory because we still are in a position where we don't have as much inventory as we need for the amount of buyers that we have. So we're still sitting in a seller's market. I think one of the things that buyers right now are wrapping their minds around is there was an increase in interest rates and all the buyers took their balls and went home. They were like, we're not going to do anything. So if something listed in like September to December
you're talking
last
about
year,
like September, October
to like February?
Until February, yeah.
So what you're seeing though is a lot of people who said that we're not going to buy right now going, yeah, I want to get back in the game. And they're surprised that they're competing because everybody else decided to come back in the game too.
So like everybody came back at the same time.
Yeah. So everybody went 8% interest rates. I'm going home. And then,
but now that it's 7.
We're back. But everybody else is back too. So I have some clients who have placed incredibly competitive offers with really strong due diligence on 4 houses. But for them to be in South Charlotte Middle School District is key.
One of the things that I think you do really, really well also is you don't just show houses, right? You kind of help give them a vision of what it could look like with a little bit of sweat equity, with a little bit of like, hey, go on YouTube and see how to do this, or go on YouTube and see how to paint a room, or go on YouTube and learn how to do a little bit of landscaping. And I think you've done really well with that in your career working with first-time home buyers, because what I see is they're in that home for 2 or 3 or 5 years, and then they call you back, and the home that you go to when you're going to help them list it and buy the next one in a lot of cases is not the same house you sold them.
No, they've done a lot of projects or whatever to them. And the interesting thing is most of those things that they can do that have a huge impact are not things that really impacted their pocketbook a lot. It's a
Little
coat of
projects
paint,
here and there.
it's a little wallpaper, it's changing out faucets or changing out the front porch lights. It's pretty simple
Home
things.
organization to a degree.
Planting shrubs.
Yeah.
Like honestly, not stuff that's really hard, but it's the things that they need to do to make the house more of a home for them.
Yeah.
And what they're actually doing as they're doing that is they're building value.
They're paying themselves.
Yeah. They're building value into the product that they're going to sell at the end. And we talk about how whenever you're thinking about going from house 1 to house 2, you break up with your house because now it's an asset. It's no longer the
And
cute little first
and by the
home.
way, that's
It's
just
an
if you're going to
asset.
sell it.
And that's if you're going to sell it, because I've already tried to talk you into keeping it.
Right.
So that's first time home buyers. They've got to have a little bit of flexibility. They've got to have a little bit of humility. Is that a
That's
fair
that's a
word?
really good one, right? No, it really is. I don't want to minimize that word. If you walk into this super proud and you're like, we're going to get the best house in the best neighborhood, well, then you're going to pay a premium,
And you're going to be broke.
and it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
If you go, I want to find the ugly duckling in a good neighborhood, or an area that is transitioning, but it has enough of the transition that's already happened that you feel comfortable about it. Like, I'm not talking about dodgy areas.
Right.
But I'm talking about an area that you go, no, I can see what's happening here. 3 years you look up and you're like, told you.
Yeah. It also merits saying, if you are that client who's like, no, I have to like walk out of my townhome across the street to the restaurants and bars. I want to be close to this scene. I need to be close to these amenities. We're going to find you what you want, right? Like, we're going to help you get exactly what you want. But it sounds terrible. It's almost like I do it with a disclaimer. Like, I don't get a vote here, but you asked me to watch out for these things for you. This is something you might want to consider. And if that doesn't accomplish your goals, then let's go after what it is that you want. If it's on MLS, they have the 3 icons. There's a garbage can that's like, don't show me this junk ever again.
Yeah.
And then they have the heart, which is like, I love it. But my favorite is
Typing the notes.
The notes.
I like this for
like
whatever.
this, and-
I don't like this for whatever reason.
And it's funny, I've started kind of coaching clients to say, if you put a trash can on something, also put a note on it so that I know why you trashed it. Because my goal is that we're going to take this really wide net that we cast in the beginning, and before we are feet on the ground, I want to be curating a packet of houses for you to look at so that you're only seeing the best of the best. And they go, what do you mean? And I was like, well, everybody's laying in the bed at night scrolling. Everybody's looking at all of the listings, and it's kind of all over the place. My goal is to take everything that you've said matters to you and kind of put it in a file. And then I'm going to look at what you favorited, but I'm also going to go, hey, 123 Main Street really has a lot of features that you seem to be consistently marking. It's been on the market for just a little bit longer than everything else, so I think that people are wondering if something's wrong. I've done a bunch of research. I think it's worth a look. And I think that's where agents show their salt. That's where you show your value, is when you can not become the magic key, but you're the person who can curate a search for a client that says, these are your best of the best.
Explain what you mean by magic key. There's a lot of agents who just are magic keys.
Oh, there are agents who are like, hey, you want to buy a house? Call me when you see something you like.
And I'll take you to show it.
And I'll take you to show it. Or their clients will say, hey, I really like this house in the neighborhood. And the agent's like, well, these are the open houses in the community. Call me if you want to make an offer. Like magic key, where you're only using the license that you have to get people in the door.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a disservice, number one, to the client, but number two, to our industry.
Right.
Like, it's your job to be the pro. It's your job to next level this, where your clients know that you know your stuff. It's almost like the difference between going to like, I'm trying to think of a really good analogy, but like, do you want to have
I
your
mean, it's
surgery
McDonald's
done?
versus 5-star restaurant.
Oh yeah. Do you want to have your surgery done by, I don't know, no offense to anybody, but like just like a random first aid person at camp, or do you want to go to like someone who graduated from Duke? They both can take care of the illness, but one of them's going to do it with far better expertise than the other.